we're going to be talking about one of the 4 features of effective instruction. As we look up here and we think of the features of effective instruction, it's another way of saying best practices. It's just good teaching. And there are 4 of them. They're explicit instruction with modeling, which I actually presented that training to you last year. And then we have 2, systematic instruction with scaffolding, multiple opportunities to practice and respond, and then immediate and corrective feedback. Now today what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out systematic instruction with scaffolding, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Now you probably remember from last year when we talked about explicit instruction with modeling, I said all of these features are married. In essence, they go together. So you really can't talk about one without talking about the other. So I'm going to do my best to pull it out, and we're really going to examine that one feature. But to get started, we're going to watch a little video. Now, I know some of you guys have seen this, but we do have some new people in the room. So I want you to watch this video. This kind of gives us a laugh, you know, to start off the afternoon. But this is an example of someone not using the features of effective instruction.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone?
And if you know this video, you know you just aged yourself, right?
Anyone? The tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which anyone raised or lowered? Raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone? Anyone? Anyone seen this before? The Laffer curve. Anyone know what this says?
Anyone recognize themselves in there?
That at this point,
Oh, you know you've seen somebody do that before.
amount of revenue as at this point.
This one was me in school.
Controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics. Voodoo economics.
All right, we're going to start off with a little quote. I love quotes. This one says, "A teacher is one who makes himself progressively unnecessary." This is the heart of our profession. Our ultimate job is really to work ourselves out of a job. Every teacher should start off in August and go, boys and girls, I'm going to work myself out of a job where when May comes, you're not going to need me anymore. I get to pass you on to the next job. And that is what teaching is all about. Here are our objectives that we're going to be covering today. We're going to define terms. We're going to examine the feature, look what research says about it. We're going to look at this particular feature and how it relates to the 5 components of reading, which are, say them with me if you would like, phonological awareness, phonics, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. Then we're going to discuss features integration, meaning we're going to talk about some elements that actually enhance this particular feature. Then we're going to watch a couple videos and see it in action. Then we're going to actually practice using the feature. That's the table work that you all are going to be doing. And then you guys are going to get to share out, which is at the table that you're going to share out, unless anyone's brave enough to share out loud. Okay? So that's what our day is going to look like. So first off, we're going to do a little warm-up activity. And I'm going to model a ladder of success. And as soon as I finish, then you all will actually make your own ladder of success. And we're actually going to use this and relate this throughout the afternoon. All right? So look up here at my big, huge poster. Isn't this nice? Can you imagine me trying to carry it in this morning? It was windy. So just visualize that. All right. So this ladder of success, this is how we're going to kind of visualize what systematic instruction is with scaffolding is. And I'm going to share a little story of when my dad taught me how to ride a bike. So when we think of the big picture, or my ultimate goal or objective or task or skill is to learn to ride a bike. Now the very first thing that my dad had to do was help me become familiar with the bike. He couldn't do anything else until he's done that. So that was the very first step. He helped me become familiar with the bike. Then he did some explicit instruction with modeling, meaning he took the bike, he described all the parts, he described how they worked. He even got on his own bike and showed me how to do it. And he said, this is what you're going to be able to do. Now, he anticipated a potential barrier, and he stepped in and provided me a scaffold. What do you think it was? Training wheels. You're absolutely right. So he stepped in and he provided me a scaffold, some training wheels. And then, before we got started, he wanted to make sure that I understood. So he started quizzing me. Where are the pedals? Now, what do you do with the pedals? That's right, you're going to have to keep pushing them forward in order to keep moving. That's right, so he was checking for understanding. So right there was a scaffold. So then the next thing he said, now, you know what? Let's give it a try. So he's going to allow me to ride the bike. So that's the second step in order for me to reach my ultimate goal. Now, he kept one scaffold in place. What do you think that was? The training wheels. So he kept that scaffold in place. And he said, are you ready to go? And I said, yes, I'm ready to try it. So do you think he just let me ride away with those training wheels on? What other scaffold do you think he put in place? He held on to me. He supported me and guided me as I was trying to ride the bike. So all the while, he's right there with me. He's actually holding on to me. And he's given me another scaffold, immediate and corrective feedback. So in April, when we talk about feedback, when we make it immediate and corrective, all of that is actually a scaffold. So all the while, he's telling me, you have to keep your head up so you don't run into anything. You have to push those pedals, otherwise you're not going to go anywhere. All the while, giving me feedback. So then he decided, well, we got to keep practicing. We need those multiple opportunities to practice in order to be able to accomplish our goal. So he decided, you know what, there is one scaffold I think we're ready to take away. What do you think it is? The training wheels. He goes, you know what, we're going to take those training wheels off. There's one scaffold, though, he decided he wanted to keep in place because now I am not riding on 4 wheels, I'm riding on 2. What do you think it is? He's going to support me. So all the while he's following me. So he's keeping that scaffold in place. Now I've done this multiple opportunities to practice. He's riding behind me, he's holding on to me, and so forth. And he decides, you know what, I think you got it. So he decides to take one scaffold away. I don't think you need my support anymore. I'm just going to follow along with you. All the while giving me feedback. Now, if I start falling, what scaffold is he going to put back in place? He's going to put that back in. Okay? So you get how the scaffolds go in and out? And each one of these steps is very systematic because that's a big picture. It seems easy to us, but at the time it wasn't. All right, so now we're going to try your own ladder of success. So inside your folder, you're going to see this. Ivory cardstock. Go ahead and get that out. All right, go ahead and look up here, and let me show you how you're going to make your ladder first. You're going to take it and you're going to put it vertically, and then you're going to fold it about 1 inch in on each side, like that, okay? So it should stand when you get finished. Let's go ahead and do that part. All right, so now get out something to write with, and we're going to make the rungs of our ladder. Now, I'm going to do it up here on the board so you can see a little bit better. But here's your ladder. This is what I'm wanting you to do. I want you to make your rungs. You make like 3, 4 of them. And I know that a ladder doesn't have this, but there's a reason why I'm going to have you do this. I want you to add a line like that. There is a purpose to my madness of why I'm making the ladder look like this. Okay? Okay? All right. So now that you have your ladder, so what I want you to do is I want you to think of something that you did not know how to do at one time. It could have been the first time you learned how to text. Could have been the first time that you learned how to play a sport, an instrument, drive a car, tie your shoes, anything. Think back to something that you did not know how to do at one time. I used riding a bike. At the top, that is your goal. Then I want you to take that big goal and I want you to break it down systematically. What did you do first? What did that person do? How did they break it down? Number 1, 2, 3. So your rungs, however many rungs that you have, okay? And raise your hand if this was super, super easy. It wasn't. I heard people say, you know what, this is kind of hard. I can't think of a goal. I can't think of anything. That is why being very systematic is not easy. And so when we think of teachers, think about it. These teachers know their content. They know the subject that they're teaching, especially if they've been doing it for many, many years. So when you know something really, really well, it is really hard to break it down into little steps and be very systematic with it. So you just experienced that. It's very hard. And so that's what we want to keep in mind, that when teachers are planning lessons, they may know their content very, very well, but they're going to have to take time, be very reflective, and understand that the people on the other end have never done it before. And they're going to have to take that big goal, big idea and concept and break it down into very small steps. Be very systematic with it. So hold on to this experience. Think about it as we go through today, okay? All right, so this is what research says when it means to be systematic along with scaffolding. It says that systematic sequencing of prompted content, materials, or a task at hand, and teacher and peer support in order to optimize learning. That's why being very systematic and providing those appropriate scaffolds are very important. So let's just pull it apart. We're going to just take systematic and we're going to kind of look at what does it mean. To be systematic, that means you select appropriate tasks or goals and you regulate the task complexity. You take that task and you're controlling the task difficulty. You are taking it from easier to more difficult. You're anticipating potential barriers. My dad already knew how to ride a bike. He can do it without even thinking. But he had to be able to break it down into steps for me in order for me to be successful. I'd never even looked at a bike before until he rolled it out in front of me. So you got to think about that. And so we need teachers to think about that. It means to carefully sequence instruction, moving from easy to more difficult. So therefore, that means I really need to know my content. Whatever it is, I need to have the big picture, the big idea, to be able to break it down from easy to more difficult. That's what true lesson planning is knowing the big picture and being able to break it down into steps. Begin with higher utility skills. And what that means is beginning with what is most commonly used, what students most commonly used across content areas. Tapping into that and using that to help you be more systematic. Begin with what the students already know, accessing that prior knowledge. For example, you guys have just recently had the vocabulary training, right, at each one of your campuses, all right? The whole vocabulary routine is not necessarily meant to be done all just like that with one word in one day. So in order for the teachers to plan true, explicit vocabulary, they actually are doing it in a very systematic way. The routine is set up that way. For example, if I was going to use the word tremendous, the very first step says, boys and girls, I want you to say the word tremendous. What's the word? Tremendous. The second step, I'm going to use the word in a student-friendly definition. So I'm going to give examples, non-examples, student-friendly definition, and so forth. For example, thunder is really, really tremendous because it makes a lot of loud noise. All right? So just having you say the word is a lot easier than when it gets to the point, step 3, where now I'm going to have you discuss the word. So thunder is tremendous. It makes a lot of loud noise. It's something that's super, super powerful. Do you know anything that is super powerful or maybe really loud? And then they get to talk to their neighbor. That is more difficult than just saying the word. So the routine in itself is very systematic. So it's understanding that we got to present something big picture, and then how do I break it down in order for them to get it? Any questions up to this point? Now you probably seen me reference this last year, this lesson cycle, and you see it on the side of the rooms, and if you look in your folder, you'll see a yellow piece of paper, so you can take it with you. All teachers are very familiar with the lesson cycle. And when we think of the complete lesson cycle, we think of I do, we do, you do. Okay? Now you see the arrow on the left-hand side? That means I have to understand my lesson as a whole, so based on how my students are responding, will tell me, do I need to stop right here? They're not getting it, and back up. Do I need to step in and provide scaffolds? This ladder, in essence, we can actually put an arrow outside here. My dad knew when to back it up, step it in, let's do this, we're not ready to move to here, and so forth. All right? Now, one thing that I do want to point out is this we do part. That's the multiple opportunities to practice. Now, if you notice, it gets smaller as it goes. And that's because this we do is very supported, that guided practice. And then you gradually release it to the you do. Okay? So in itself, when they plan those multiple opportunities to practice, they have to do it in a very systematic way. This is more restrictive than this. Does that make sense? So these tasks are easier, these are more difficult, the activities that they're planning. Okay? So now let's talk about scaffolding. And I want you to put up at the top of this page, I want you to put the word gradual, release, and temporary. When we provide scaffolding, it's a process that enables a child or a novice, well, it could be an adult, to solve a problem or carry out a task or achieve a goal that would be beyond his or her unassisted efforts. We've all been a novice at one time and had to learn something new. And that scaffold is kind of like I help you get up over that hump. So somebody has broke it down systematically. I'm having a hard time. I'm not about to fall off. I'm about to fall off that rung of that ladder. I'm going to step in. I'm going to give you the scaffold so I can keep you there, right there in your zone of proximity where you're there, that maximum. I call it John Maxwell calls it the sweet spot, the Goldilocks, right there where you are in the learning zone. So I got to keep you there, and that is the purpose of a scaffold. One thing we want to keep in mind is a scaffold is used to increase the support of a student that is struggling. Now I want you to highlight that bullet right there. Decrease the support as the students advance. We as teachers sometimes keep a scaffold there way too long, and we never ever take it away. And then when the student has to actually perform it all on their own at that you do, we can't figure out why they did not accomplish it. So that's why this gets smaller right here, is you are gradually taking those scaffolds away, because at the you do, I'm not providing you any scaffolds. I'm asking you to actually do the task. And so that's why it's really important when we're planning that we do, we have to be very systematic, because we're progressively getting them to where they can do it on their own. Because ultimately, whatever we're doing, we want them to be fluent at that task, to where they own it and they do not need anyone there to help them. That's why I had you write gradual release and temporary. And a lot of times we keep scaffolds there way too long. Prime example, we always use a graphic organizer when we're writing. We always use a graphic organizer when we're reading. There comes a time We don't need a graphic organizer. They should be able to do it without it. So gradually taking that away. Does it make sense? All right, so I'm going to give you a couple of little examples of what we mean by scaffolds. And I want you to think about, when I do these, do my teachers use them? And do they use them all year long? Do you see on the last day of school they're still using that scaffold? Now granted, there are going to be children that are still going to need the scaffold, but I want you to ask your question and even ask your teachers, when is it time to gradually release that scaffold? Manipulatives. CPQs, which are comprehension purpose questions. Using acronyms or highlighting. Anchor charts. Picture support. Think alouds. Graphic organizers. Any sort of organizational tool, like to-do list, direction cards, an agenda, or a bookmark. Or if we have younger children, we want them to follow along with their finger as they're reading. Eventually we have to take that away and we want to read with our eyes. Any visual or verbal cues. Word walls. Those are scaffolds. Think, pair, share. Some behavior scaffolds are like name dropping, talking chips, actually defining the space. The corrective and specific aspect of feedback. Remember, that's a scaffold. Accessing prior knowledge or background knowledge and making connections. And then also an example of a scaffold is actually increasing the intensity, meaning I'm going to be more explicit for this particular child versus this child. That's actually a scaffold for that child. I'm going to provide this child more opportunities to practice. That's actually a scaffold for that particular child. I'm going to break this down into smaller steps. Instead of 3 steps, I'm going to break it down to 2 here, 2 here, and 2 here. I'm going to make it more systematic. That's a scaffold for some people versus others may only need 3 steps. So those are some examples of scaffolds. So now what I would like for you to do is get out your ladder, and that line that's right here on the side, this is where you're going to write your scaffolds. So think of the very first step. If you had sew a button, drive a car, what was the very first thing that you did? What are some scaffolds that that person gave you? Did they draw a picture? Did they model it for you? Did they do hand over hand? And then your step 2, what was some scaffolds that they used? Your step 3, what were some scaffolds that they used? And so forth. Okay, so if we had to put it together, and as administrators, if you were going into the classroom, or if you were sitting with your teachers maybe during a planning meeting, here is some of the things you want to hear or things you want to look for, or to look in the lesson plans, or if you're having conversations so you can get an idea is, does the teacher truly understand what it means to be systematic and to provide appropriate scaffolding? You want to know, does the teacher understand, have the knowledge and skills, all that information that what they're trying to teach, either the content, the lesson, or the skill or the task, are they presenting it in a logical order? Are they presenting high utility skills are presented first? It means they're going to tap into things that they've already know how to do, things that they're very familiar with first before moving to more difficult. Have they taken this big picture or this concept and broken it down from simple to more complex, or easier to more difficult? And you and I have already experienced that right off the bat with the warm-up. It's hard. When you know something really, really well, it's hard to break it down into steps. But do our teachers know the content well enough? Have they actually sat and really reflected on that lesson in order to break it down? And do they have those appropriate scaffolds in place, and are they prepared to take those away? And do they have enough scaffolds in place? So these are some things you want to ask yourself when you're observing, or when you're looking at their lesson plans, or you're sitting in that planning meeting and listening to those conversations. This is not easy, being systematic in providing appropriate scaffolds. It takes a lot of planning, and it takes a lot of, I have to know my content well enough in order to be able to break it down for somebody who doesn't know. And those of you who were here when I did explicit instruction with modeling, I said that being explicit is hard, because when you know something really well, you just want to give it to somebody the information real breezy, real easy, and people are like, what? I don't get it. And you're like, you don't get it? What do you mean you don't get it? And it's because we know it so well, and we lose our explicitness, and that's what we constantly need to be reminding teachers, is sometimes we get to know a content so well that we lose that explicitness, and we can't break it down for somebody who doesn't know. Okay, so let's kind of do some little chucking and chewing and kind of reviewing. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about this so far up to this point. What is one thing that your teachers on your campus are already doing when it comes to this particular feature? What aspect? You're like, you know what, my teachers are pretty good at this. Or maybe you have this grade level is, but this grade level is not. And then what is one thing you would like your teachers to be doing differently? This is what I heard. I heard this one a lot. Almost like when I did that little whip around, I heard this one a lot. You started labeling and naming a lot of scaffolds that the teachers use. But then right after that I heard, but they don't take them away. They kind of leave them there too long. I also heard that we tend not to do as much we do. So we kind of do this, and then we jump way down here. We don't do enough, and we're not systematic enough with it. We give them something that they actually cannot do. And so this we do should have been here, so we should have kind of prepped them before what the activity we were choosing. I also heard that our teachers need to, well, they're systematic with their lesson, but they don't anticipate potential barriers. Oh, I might need those training wheels. Oh, they don't anticipate those potential barriers. They plan systematic, but they don't think long term, what could possibly happen and where is it going to happen, and I need to be ready for it so I can step in and give them those scaffolds. And then some of them are like, well, they're kind of like all over the place. They know their content so well that they just get up there and they just start talking about their content. And they are not very systematic about it on how they present the information. They're not building on it and so forth. Okay, so now we're going to move into the next objective where we're actually going to do some practicing. So there's actually a 4-step process that it takes when we're actually going to take a concept and be systematic with it. I'm actually going to do the I do, and I'm going to do the I do with phonological awareness. Then everyone in the room is going to do a we do with vocabulary. All right? And then at your table, you guys are going to break off in twos. 2 people are going to do the phonics, 2 people are going to do the fluency, and 2 people are going to do the comprehension, and then you guys will share at your tables. Okay? So that's how we're going to do it. So we're actually going to take being systematic through all 5 components of reading. I'm going to model phonological awareness. We're all going to do vocabulary, and at your tables, you guys are going to split up the others and share out. Okay? So that's how this is going to look. Now, when I'm modeling this, this is really the process you're actually going to be taking at your table. So, while I'm doing this, I want you to get out handout number 1, just so you're kind of familiar with what I'm doing up here, along with when it comes time to actually for you to do it at the table. All right, so the 4-step process. Step 1 is you think about your class that you have taught or observed, and you included a student that presented a particular academic challenge with a particular literacy component. So I'm thinking about my class, I got it. So for this particular activity, I'm going to use phonological awareness. With this particular class, I've got a group of kids that are like, you know what, they're having a hard time with phonological awareness. Bam, I'm going to pull that component out. This is what I'm going to zero in on, and I'm going to focus on and be a little bit more systematic with. Okay? That's step 1. Step 2, phonological awareness is a big concept. It's like an umbrella, and there are a lot of little skills and tasks that fall under phonological awareness. Well, if I'm going to understand my child's having a hard time with phonological awareness, I have to understand the big picture, and I have to be able to break it down from easy to more difficult. So I'm going to take this big concept, phonological awareness, and I'm going to be able to put it in my head, break it down from easy to more difficult, because I have to be able to pinpoint right where the student's learning broke down. If I don't understand the big concept, I'm not going to be able to see where it broke down. So I know that rhyming is the easiest task, because I have to be able to put them in order from easier to more difficult. Alliteration, sentence segmenting, syllabication, onset and rhymes, phoneme blending, phoneme segmenting, phoneme manipulation. Rhyming is an easier task than phoneme manipulation. If I ask you, do cat and hat rhyme? Yes or no? Yes. That is an easier task than saying, can you say cat without the k? At. Okay? Having you identify rhyme and manipulate the phonemes or the individual sounds is a lot more difficult than just identifying a rhyme. Now, even within this task, I can make it easy or difficult. Having you say, do cat and hat rhyme? Yes or no? Yes? No? Yes. Okay? Cat and hat. Can you give me another word that rhymes with cat and hat? Bat. Having you identify a rhyme or produce one, identifying is a lot easier than producing. So I can even take that individual task, that individual skill, and break it down from easier to more difficult. That's how well they need to know these components, 5 components, or their content if we're talking about subject area. Okay? So now I've got them in order from easier to more difficult. Now I'm going to step over here. The other components don't work so easy of laying them in order from easier to more difficult. It really depends on the child and the lesson that you're teaching. Okay? But phonological awareness, this is the order from easier to more difficult. So I've got them in order. So step 3, I'm analyzing the child, how the lesson played out, how they responded to my instruction, and I'm going, where did the learning break down? Well, for the sake of this model, it broke down right here with alliteration. All right? Now I want you to notice, see how these scaffolds goes from easier to more difficult? Just make a note of that. So step 3, I'm going to find the point where it broke down, which was alliteration, and I'm going to pull that out. Okay? That's where I'm going to focus on. So now I got to come up with a game plan. I'm going to deliver my lesson, but I've got to plan some scaffolds. I got to anticipate those barriers, those potential barriers, and when I'm going to step in and provide that support. So then therefore I can break it away in order for them to be successful. So that's step 3. So then step 4, I've got to plan some scaffolds. So it's alliteration. I need to come up with the first scaffold. But before I explain this slide, I want you to add to your slide an arrow that goes right to here, a double-sided arrow. And on this side, I want you to put easy or less support, difficult, more support on this end. Double-sided arrow, easy, less support, difficult, more support. Okay. So I've got a group of kids, we're doing a lesson on alliteration, and I know that they have a hard time. They didn't get it in my whole group, so I got them over here on my teacher table. And I'm coming up with my lesson plan, and I need some possible scaffolds before I start this lesson. Well, scaffold 1 is, I may just ensure that they even know what alliteration is. I may access their prior knowledge. We did this as a whole group, and maybe that's all I need to do is tap into that background knowledge. So it may sound something like this. Boys and girls, today we're going to work on alliteration. Alliteration is when a series of words in a row begins with the same sound. Do you remember when we did the alliteration together as a class? Remember when we did Billy blows big bubbles? Well, today you guys are going to create an alliterative sentence by the end of today's lesson. And they may go, oh, that's what it is, now I remember. That's it. That's the only scaffold you've got to provide. We're moving right along with our lesson. But that may not work. So I've just went from easy, I'm stepping in, and I'm giving that more of that support. So now I may want to do scaffold 2. Instead of we just coming up with an alliterative sentence on our own and letting them pick it, I'm going to be a little bit more restrictive. I'm going to control it more. So I may have them choose between these sounds because these are easier sounds, and I know that they know them. Okay? Maybe that doesn't work. So now I've got to go in even more. And I'm going to pick words that I know that they know. I'm going to control it in order for us to make that alliterative sentence. Okay? Does that make sense up to this point? Okay. Now, sometimes you may have a scaffold that you're like, oh, it's working. And then all of a sudden, it starts getting a little rocky. But you don't want to go and be really, really restrictive. You just want to maybe scaffold that scaffold, give an additional scaffold to enhance it a little bit. So it may look something like this. Maybe I want to just use their names. Maybe I'm just going to orally review the sounds first and the words to make sure that they know the sound and the word before we even get started. Or maybe I'm going to limit it to how many sentences or how many words we actually use in the sentence. Okay? All right, any questions? Okay, so now we're going to try the we do, and Maria and I are going to walk around the room, so if you need any assistance or you want to pick our brains, we'll be able to help you. So I want you to get out handout number 1, which you already had out, was vocabulary. So here's what the process looked like. First, step 1, you're going to reflect on a challenging students. Okay, here you are, you're doing your vocabulary lesson. And you've identified vocabulary as where we're going to need some extra help. All right? Now look over here on the left where it says vocabulary concepts and skills. This is just like the phonological awareness. These are all the skills that are involved when it comes to vocabulary. Over on the right, where it has numbers 1 through 8, easier to more difficult, you have to take those boxes. So as a table, have a conversation on what is considered the easier skill or task and put them in order to the most difficult. Then once you've done that, come to an agreement with your table which one of those you want to practice coming up with scaffolds with. So then you'll circle it. That's step 3. Let's say, for example, illustrating the word. I'm going to circle it. So then as a table, you'll have conversations on how do we come up with some 3 scaffolds for that particular task or skill, such as illustrating the word. And remember, easy to more difficult with the scaffolds. They're not just 3 individual activities or 3 things to do with vocabulary. Stay focused with illustrating the word. How do I provide a scaffold that's like this? Less support, to more support, to more support when it comes to those 3. I am going to give you 8 minutes. If you finish in 8 minutes, then go to the second page of handout number 1 and pick one of those scaffolds and go even further. Okay? I heard some really awesome conversations, especially on what is considered a more difficult task than others, like putting them in order. And I just went around and I've kind of scanned on different scaffolds. Good conversations. Let me pose this question to you all. Was this kind of difficult? Do you think it would have been more difficult if I asked you to do it on your own? Yes. Okay, so I'm not sure exactly how your planning goes at your schools. If your teachers plan alone, Do they plan alone? You don't have to answer it. Just kind of think about it. Just sit on it and think about it. Do they plan alone? Or when they're planning, do they all come in the room and they pass out what they're going to be doing? Or do they sit and have conversations about the lesson and talk about and anticipate potential barriers in the lessons that they're going to be teaching next week? And picking each other's brains on what type of scaffolds that could be used. And you know what? That particular scaffold or that multiple opportunity to practice would work a lot better here versus here. Do they have those kind of conversations going on in their grade level meetings? Don't answer it. Just think about it. Because in essence, you guys were a grade level having a conversation. So just kind of think about that. And how does that look on your campus? Because it's not easy, especially if you happen to have any students that may be struggling. And do we have those? Sure. All right. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to conquer and divide and then share out. So at your table, and I'll go ahead and make assignments. That way it's a lot quicker, and that way we can go ahead and get started. I'm going to go around and I'm going to assign pairs. Who's going to do phonics, fluency, comprehension at your table? Then you go ahead and get started. It's all the same handout. You'll just have to flip till you find it. Same process. You're just working with that particular component. Phonics, fluency, comprehension. Okay. So now what I would like for you to do is just share what you have. You don't necessarily have to share the order. You can share how difficult it was, because a lot of the conversations I was having as we were going around is it really depends on the age, grade level that you're working on, and so forth. So really the experience of being able to take comprehension, and do I understand all of the skills that are involved when it comes to being able to comprehend? Can I put it in order from easier to more difficult? That order is going to look different depending on the age grade level that you're working with. And that's why it's very powerful to have more than one person in the room to have those kind of conversations and so forth. So don't spend a lot of time on that, but then really share your scaffolds. Okay? So go ahead and share at your table. Take turns, phonics, share with everybody, fluency, comprehension, and so forth. Is this an easy process? No. And I had somebody share with me, well, this takes a lot of time. That's a lot of conversations and a lot of time for teachers to plan. And that's that magic word, that one that we always wish we had more time, and there's not more time. You can't make more time. We have what we have when it comes to time. Here's a question that I want you you don't have to answer it, and I just want you to think about it. Sometimes when you have conversations about students that are struggling and so forth, and maybe the teacher's saying, well, this particular child is having a hard time with phonological awareness. They don't know PA, or they're not a fluent reader. And then you'll ask them, so what are you going to do to help this particular child? And they can't answer the question. Well, that doesn't mean that they're not able to be systematic with their instruction and they do not know how to provide scaffolding. What that means when you get those kind of responses means I don't know how, and I don't understand what phonological awareness means, and I don't understand what fluency means. That would be like somebody coming to me and going, when I was 4, because that's when I learned how to ride a bike, Michelle, happy birthday, here's your bike. Go ride your bike. Here you go, teacher. Go teach fluency. Have a good time. If I don't understand it, if I didn't understand how to ride a bike, I would not have been able to break it down into steps for you and then tell you what scaffolds to provide in order to teach somebody how to ride a bike. So if I don't understand fluency, I don't understand comprehension, and I can't answer those kind of questions, then what the teacher is telling you is I don't understand that reading component. So then for next year, that may be something you want to think about, how you utilize your TLI specialist or your campus coaches. We're going to get out those state standards because it is aligned from kinder all the way through 12, so you can see the progression from easier to more difficult. And I'm going to teach this component of reading and make sure that my teachers truly understand each one of the 5 components of reading. If they know the 5 components of reading, then they're going to have a lot easier time taking that big picture, because we can put whatever up here. We can put comprehension, fluency, vocabulary, phonological awareness up here. Can I break it down systematically? And if the child has a hard time with this step, do I know what to do? Okay? So just be thinking about that. It may not be, oh my gosh, I got to give them this training because they don't know, they're not being systematic. It could be, I don't know the component of reading. So when you're planning for next year, that might be something that you want to think about. Okay, there is no black and white answer. Some of you are going, well, what's the right answer? Did I get an A? Did I get a 100? There's not. It just, when what you put up here with fluency, comprehension, phonological awareness, it depends on the grade level. It also depends on the student. You can take an individual student when it comes to fluency, and you can say, you know what? This particular task is easy, and this one's more difficult for this child. So the order can look even different that way. Okay, so there is no black and white. The only one that's black and white that you put them in order is phonological awareness. That continuum that was up there, that is the continuum from easy to more difficult. Okay? All right. We're going to watch just this one video, and then I'm going to close it out real quick so you guys can leave a little early, okay? So when you're watching this video, I want you to get out handout number 3. If you're one of those that like to take notes during a video, that is your note-taking document. Otherwise, you can just watch the video. So what I want you to be looking for is I want you to look at this teacher's lesson. She's doing a small group lesson. Look at how the big picture, how did she start off progressively going from easy to more difficult with the scope of the lesson as a whole? And what kind of scaffolds did she step in and give the children when their learning broke down? Okay?
Using your fingers, hold it up high so I can see it. Tug. Thank you. All right, now we are going to build some words in the UG family. What sound does you make, everybody? And if I put in, what sound does you make? G says G. G. What sound does G make? G. So if I put these two sounds together, it makes the sound Brooklyn, eyes over here. I'm going to put a few sounds up front. Is this ever going to change if they all rhyme with ug? Jalen, will that ever change? No, these are going to stay exactly the same. All we're going to do is change the beginning sound. And the first one, I'm going to put, what letter is this? L. Roderick, what sound does L make? Ooh. So if I had ooh, ug, what would the word be? Love. Good. If I change the ooh to a r sound, it would be rug. Rug. If I change the to a sound, it would be ug. Hug. Very good. Just Jalen. Can you try this word for me? Jug. And do you know that he didn't have to sound out j, because he already knew that UG says ug. So very quickly he put j, ug together and said jug. Brooklyn, can you see if you can do it that fast? What does UG say, darling? Remember, they're all going to rhyme with ug. So do we have to sound this part out? We already know it says ug. Ug. Tug. If you tug something, you're pulling on it. Damon, this is your word. What letter is this? Do it faster. Bug. Do it faster. Bug. Bug. Did you hear how there were no quiet spaces in between those sounds? Because what I heard Damon do, I heard this. I heard good. That's hard to put together, isn't it? No. That would be hard for me to do. But if you put them close together and say the sounds, Damon, very, very quickly like this, bug, it makes it a lot easier to read that word. We just practiced sounding out words that had the ug word family in it, and now we're going to build some words that have ug. And you two are going to work as a partner, and you three are going to work as a group, Isaac, which means that you'll have one set of cards, and you'll have to work with your partner to do this.
Okay, so go ahead and turn to your table mates. And think about it, how she started off, and then right there what you saw there at the tail end, how is that systematic on a whole? That little lesson, she's working on the word family UG. So how was she systematic? How did she start off easy? And how did she get progressively harder? What kind of scaffolds did she do for the students? So go ahead and talk to your table mates. So this is what I heard some of you all saying. A lot of you rattled off a lot of scaffolds that she was doing, such as a lot of modeling. She actually had manipulatives, with the actual letter cards, and was modeling and so forth. She was doing a lot of visual cues, actually sweeping the finger and showing them, it's not this, say it quickly, so forth. She was giving them some very specific feedback. There's not any quiet sounds in between. We're going to say it real quickly and so forth. And she even gave models of what each one of the students were doing and so forth. A finger blending with the, she was actually doing that and modeling that. The actual whole lesson as a whole, especially this table, is actually talking about how they actually started off. She was doing lots of examples, giving lots of examples. Then she moved into the we do, and she did her we do a little different, probably because it was actually a small group. She gave individual turns and let them actually try building a word each. Then she moved on to, actually now they were going to do partners, and they were going to do it together. All right? And so how do you think she would hopefully end it with? Independent. So they would move on to the you do. So basically her doing a lot of I do, and then that we do, she was right there with them. So she was kind of teetering right here. And then that last we do was probably right here. So ultimately, they would be able to know this word family, which is down here with the you. All right. So now we're moving on to that last objective, where I said that we were going to talk about different elements that enhance this feature, and here are what they are. That first one, I want you to circle it, put a big star by it, and put a happy face next to it. Planning. And we experienced that today. That in order to have high quality instruction going on in our classroom, that is the key. That is the key. And there is a difference between writing a lesson plan and actually reflecting about our lesson and having those instructional conversations going on. And then we also talked about that if the instructional conversations are not deep and powerful, it may be the fact I just don't know. And so we need to give them that knowledge. Okay? Bullet number 2 and bullet number 3, put a circle around those two together. Assessment and data use. We can have formal assessments, or you can have informal assessments, such as anecdotal notes, or how your students are actually responding to your instruction. We have to use all of our assessments. We have to use that data to inform our instruction. That data will tell us how systematic do we have to be. Do I need to break it down into only 3 steps, or do I need to even be more systematic and break it down even more? Or do I need to provide more scaffolds for this student versus this one? My assessments and my data will tell me I have to use it. To be systematic and provide scaffolding, put anywhere, right out next to grouping. That means we can do it anywhere in the classroom in any different type of grouping format. Do it whole group, small group, partners, one-on-one, any way. Okay. Put a star next to pacing. How well I know my standards and how well I know the 5 components of reading, and understand that in relation to what age grade level I serve or I teach, will help me be better at understanding how to control the task difficulty. Take that big component and be able to control it and break it down from easier to more difficult. All of that will help with my planning. The more scaffolds I know, I'll be able to plan a lot easier and so forth. And before you leave, I have a whole corner back there of ideas, just like I did the last year. So get your cameras out and steal away and take them back with you. I know that, and I'm going to get a star next to pacing, because my pacing will be quick and efficient in the classroom. Therefore, I'll be truly differentiating my instruction for all of my students in the classroom. then I want you to put a circle around those last two, management and motivation, and put a big smiley face next to those. I will have awesome classroom management, and ultimately my kids will be motivated, and I will be motivated as a teacher as well. So, to wrap it up, systematic instruction with scaffolding does improve students' cognitive abilities because we build and help them come to mastery. It increases our instructional efficiency when we can understand the big picture and be able to break it down. It creates momentum. It is best practices, and it guides our quality in delivering those state standards. Thank you very much. You guys have a great evening.